Welcome everyone. So good to have you with us this evening for our TrendForce Basics 101 tonight. Obviously, we've had a couple dozen of new team members join our squad, and so there's no better time than now to go through and do a fresh training on the basics of how to use our strategy and our indicators. So without any further ado, guys, just to remind you guys, tonight we're obviously live. It's our usual Tuesday night training, and on Thursday, so 2 nights from now, we're going to do 102, which is going to be all the fancy bells and whistles. But tonight is going to be TrendForce, the indicators scaled right back so that you can learn the fundamentals of what all the different pieces mean, how they function together. And then watch out, because the next few days I'm also going to upload a video on how to use TradingView well and actually how to paper trade and demo trade. So some of you might already be clicking around and figuring that out, but I will be doing a special video on it as well. So without any further ado, so good to see so many of you guys on live with us right now already. Can see some of your faces. Zeph, good to see you, bro. So much love for you all the way down in the middle of the island. But let me find Dad and pin him to the screen, and we are going to crank into it this evening. So let's go.
Let's go, let's go. Well, good evening, TrendForce traders. So good to have you join us tonight. So excited to share what I'm going to be sharing with our teaching and training. What an awesome time to be trading. Gee, these markets, I've never seen this level of volatility. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it. So obviously trade with caution, but wow, it's exciting. I think we can expect some really, really big moves, in the weeks ahead, because what happens when you have these huge moves, it spreads out all our pivots, and they're often, price moves between pivots, so it tends to move them out, and that creates more space for bigger moves. So, I mean, the market maybe still needs to settle, but it's created a lot of space, for price action. So, I mean, I'm so excited about trading at this next season. And again, so good to have a lot of the new people who signed up recently join us on this journey. And I did say, I think last week, it's going to sound like a foreign language at first, the way we talk and things we say, and even learning the indicator, there's a lot there. It would look very foreign, but eventually it'll be part of your subconscious. You'll look and you'll know. You won't have to kind of try to work out everything all the time. It does get easier. So again, don't be overwhelmed. You're at the start of your journey, but it's definitely going to get easier as you move along. So I'm going to share my screen, but I want to warn you first, you'll get a shock when you see my screen. And I just want to show you how to just clear your screen slightly. So I'm going to share it because I've noticed I'm not picking on anyone here, but sometimes I see the odd thing posted and I thought, wow, that looks like a busy screen. So just to make the colors a bit clearer, some of you may have worked it out already, but I know we have a lot of new people with us tonight. So if you can let me share my screen, you can give me permission. I think this is the one I want. Let me see if I got the right one. Share. Yes, here we go. So look, don't get a fright. This looks obviously not very clear right now when you look. Let me just take that in slightly. So often when you open up TradingView and you load the indicator, this is often the default setting on TradingView. So you've got all the settings next to the indicator up here. They're all the different settings. And plus you got the highlighted levels down the side. So the easiest way to get rid of those, if you don't know yet, you simply go to the indicator. It's TrendForce version 2. You click on this bolt here, and then you click on Style. If you go right down to the bottom, there's two options there. You'll see at the bottom, labels on price. You click the labels off, and you can see immediately the right-hand side is clear. And values on status line, if you click that, immediately now the top line's clear. Then if your screen's looking a bit gray and you've got all these lines, I'm not sure how clear it is on the Zoom tonight, but there's grid lines that can be the natural default. To get rid of those and to get a nice black screen, you just put your mouse anywhere on the screen, you right click, you go down to settings, and then there's a lot of different options you can choose here, but you click on canvas. Then under canvas, under background, well, let's first see under background, if you make that, I'll make it the darkest color, boom, look at that. And then the grid lines are still there, but you can hide them by just going to under grid lines, you go down to none. Boom, and there we go. So that makes the screen a whole lot clearer, much better than what it looked like. So if you can do that, I find it easy to read a screen like that. And so as you know, we have been throwing things out. We're always looking to improve the indicator. And so, Ty, we keep discussing. So next Tuesday, we're going to release the MACD alerts, which is a real game changer. That'll be next Tuesday. People have also asked about the labels right. So I've set these labels. Some people like them just, off. So I've put that back in, and I'm just going to spend the week just testing again. But you do get more distortion with the colorful like that. It's just unfortunately a bug that's crept into TradingView. It was never there when we dealt with version 1. I even loaded version 1, tested that, and now there also are some misplots. So we have got the fix for that. So if you haven't worked that out yet, if you are new, if suddenly you're missing some colorful, you simply go to the indicator and you go under inputs and you click this box, either on or off. If it's checked already, uncheck it. That just says plot reset. So TradingView, if for some reason is struggling when you change from normal candles to Heikin-Ashi candles. So it doesn't really happen with normal candles, just Heikin-Ashi. There's a lot more data that goes into Heikin-Ashi. And so TradingView hasn't been coping in the last month or so. Hopefully they will fix the bug, but I'm just working on that all the time. I also spoke, we may also make the zones I'm going to talk about tonight, a little bit thinner too. They're quite thick because they do represent zones, but we may also thin those out slightly. But as you know, everything can be edited, which is the great part about this indicator. You can change anything. So I'm starting with the MACD off. You'll see no MACD, and we're going to strip this right back. So I'm going to delete the full indicator there, and we're going to start from scratch tonight. So I'm going to use a similar approach to what I've used before, just to unpack how this whole thing works. So I'm going to look mainly at the trend zones tonight, or the EMAs, was obviously a key part of the strategy, and mention why we chose them. So tonight is put in the message, it's basics, and then the next week is bells and whistles. So sorry, on Thursday. So we're doing 2 sessions this week. We want to try and get all our new people up and running as soon as possible. So basics tonight, and then we're going to go one level deeper on Thursday with bells and whistles. So for some of our more experienced students, a lot of these things you will know already, but I think to reinforce stuff, hey, you can't lose. So a lot of it will be reinforcement, and maybe I'll explain things in a different way. And so obviously our indicator is called TrendForce. And we do have a number of EMAs that we're going to look through tonight. And all of them are based on Fibonacci numbers. Now, Ty has mentioned before, I'm a huge fan of Fibonacci numbers. So I won't go into the mathematical side, but it's amazing. They say it's like God's nature. If you look at all the shapes in nature, even our koru, that shape, it's all based on Fibonacci numbers. So I really believe it's a God invention. And it just happens that that Fibonacci numbers give the best indication of price action. And there's a reason for that, because all the big institutions, the big traders, the banks, financial institutions, they base all their algorithms on Fibonacci numbers. So you may have heard of the term algo traders. It just means algorithm traders. So they set up algorithms, to try and obviously set up their bots and things. And they're all based on Fibonacci numbers. And so when we use Fibonacci numbers, we find that it's far easier to predict price action. So everything in this indicator is like Fibonacci, except for some parts of the MACD. And that is the main part of the MACD. As you know, I did not invent. That's been a popular indicator for many years. We just modified it for our strategy. And so let's just have a look. So we're going to start looking at the main trend indicator. How do we determine trend? I mean, the indicator is called TrendForce. And so we're first going to turn on the EMA 233. And we're going to talk about this. I'll probably spend the most time looking at this EMA. So this is a moving average. EMA stands for exponential moving average. And so basically each candle represents 233 minutes worth of information. And so the reason why we've chosen this one, this is huge for price action. And it also determines a large part of our strategy. And so as you can see, this, not every EMA is color coded, but everyone knows I love my colors. But you can see if we just scroll back, this moving average changes color. So if it's green, we're in an uptrend. If we're red, we're in a downtrend. Now, this is a pretty key part, this 233, a huge part of our strategy. Now, some people in the trading world use the 200. And look, you could probably use any number, but you will find that price action really respects. Just look over here. As I'm saying that, look at our price action respected the 233. Look here, price tried to break below, couldn't, bounced off, came back over here. As we changed the downtrend, took 1, 2, 3, 4, about 6 candles before it broke below. So we've chosen the EMAs, Ty and I, that most respect price action. Now, this is a real key because this is one of the main measures we use as trend. Remember the saying in trading, trend is your friend. And so the 233 is one of the key EMAs that determine whether you're on an uptrend or downtrend. And the other key with the 233, it also generates our signals. So if I turned on next our buy and sell signals. So if we look under style, and let's go down to there's our buy signal and there's our sell signal. So you would have seen some signals pop on the screen. And so there we got a sell signal, buy signal, a sell, buy signal. And so the way we've done our algorithm is you will only get buy signals when you're above this 233, so this thick, darker green line, and you'll only get sell signals when you're below. So that's why this 233 is so important. It's our main determinator of trend, and it also will determine whether we're going to get buy and sell signals. So if you just go back, we'll shrink the screen slightly, you will see we've got a buy signal, we're above there, there's a buy signal, there's a buy signal. And if we scroll far enough back, you'll see only buy signals being plotted. And we'll have to go right back. Let's wait until the trend turned. I'll just shrink my screen a bit more. Okay, there we got a sell signal way back there. It was on that candle, price broke below. And so you will only see buy signals above and sell signals below. So that really kind of splits our main trend. And so we've called this TrendForce our indicator because we want to really encourage you to trade with trend. So generally, of course, you do get range when multiple signals plot off. For example, here we can see the 233 is green, red, green, red. There's a little green block in there, red. So when it's changing color like that, you're in range, you can see that this 233 is almost going sideways. So we shouldn't trade in range. There's a saying, range of danger. And so that 233 is really determining our sell and buy signals. Now, for those who have done a bit of trading, we do have a counter trend signal, but you don't encourage new people to try the counter trend signal yet. That is takes a lot more skill and it's more of a high risk. So there's another part I want to introduce here too. If we look at the 233, we've got a little triangle up and triangle down that plots. So let me just turn that on. So, sorry, it's under inputs. So it's good to look down to look through the indicator. You click on this bolt over there and that gives you all the different settings. As you see, everything's turned off. If we scroll down, we can see here that we have the 233 M15 trend break signal. And so I'm going to just explain that and then we're going to look. So whenever price breaks above the 233 and you're also above another EMA, which we'll come to in a minute, it plots a little triangle up to show that you're back on trend. Here, it's showing we're trying to get back on trend. Now remember, I've said this a number of times in previous trading, when we're plotting this green triangle up, it's not a buy signal because price will often come back and retest this 233. All right, so it just tells you when you see that arrow, it means you're probably going to start seeing buy signals plotted. Now, the reason why we've chosen the 233 is that it basically, on the 1 minute, you'll see if we look here, now it may take a bit of a while to grasp this. If we click on the indicator, we'll see here that this is the 15-minute trend zone width on M1. So when we look at this 233, because a lot of traders, they look at what the 15-minute is doing. So as it happens, we kind of worked this out just through trial and error. We've realized after a while why this EMA is so significant, this trend zone, is because this tells us exactly what is happening on the 15-minute. So if I've got a 15-minute loaded just with a basic trading trend zone on that we'll talk about in a minute. So here we've got a 15-minute chart. And you can see this going all the way back to, well, let's just say that was at 5:15 this morning. We had a huge move up. So if we look at this, let's just get this in the right space here. So if we looked at an example, so here we've got, let's just go when it's fairly steep. I mean, it's true for all the time. So if we go back to this signal over here, this was at 8 o'clock this morning. And so 8 o'clock would be about over here when we had that big move up. So on the 1 minute, this is the 233, but it relates to the trend zone on the 15-minute. So if I ran, let me just change this partition a bit here. So if I ran my mouse from about, what did I say, 8 o'clock, so let's just go to 8 o'clock. And if I ran my mouse along the 233, now I know often the Zoom screen is not so clear, but what is happening on the 15-minute screen is that my crosshairs are going up this trend zone. And so this is why this is such a good indication of trend. You know, people tend to follow trend, and the 15-minute is huge for trade. So some people look to the 15-minute to determine whether they're taking buys or sells. So we've cleverly worked out for our strategy in TrendForce that this 233 is exactly the same as this 15-minute trend zone. And so this is that's why it's such a key part of our strategy. So once you see a triangle like that, a triangle up, that means you've broken above the 233 and you can expect to get buy signals. And sure enough, there was a buy signal and up price ran. So let me just shrink this other screen again. So that is the first, one of the most important EMAs or trend zones that we use, the 233 representing what's happening on the 15-minute. And so if we just go, let's go right back to see where we had some sells. I'm going to crunch the screen up a little bit more. We've been in such a uptrend this morning, but you can see here as an example that we can see that price broke below the 233, that plotted at red triangle down. That means we're on trend and that sell signals will be generated. Whenever you see, by the way, I would have said this to some of my older students would know this, whenever you get a signal close to a zone, it tends to be a big move. So you can see we've got a sell signal very close to our 233, which is our 15-minute zone. And sure enough, we can see that that trade dropped 500 pips. All right, so that is the first zone I wanted to look at, the first EMA, which is the 233. Then the next one we're going to pop up and load. And by the way, if you have got questions, pop them in the feed and then we'll definitely come to them later. It's a great time to ask questions. The next one we're going to pop on. So we're mainly just looking at the zones tonight. So we're not going to take all night. We'll give you some things to chew on. The next one is the 1 hour trend zone, which is the 987. So that is the purple line. So this one doesn't change color. So this stays purple the whole time because, I mean, I can make anything change color, but when it runs flat, it would change quite a bit between two colors. So this 987 is also huge for price action. And you can see whenever price is around there, there's often quite a big move. So here, obviously, price was going sideways, so not a great indication. But the reason why we have the 987 is that it represents the 1 hour zone. And so you can see now, if we look over here, we can see that price is slowly moving up. We can see that we are in an uptrend, the 1 hour is an uptrend. And we can do the same thing like I did with the 15-minute. If I just open up the screen here and I change this screen to a 1 hour, and let's just pull that across here. So now we're on a 1 hour. We can see the trend zone here. So let's just rewind back. So the same will apply, exactly the same as the 233. Well, I went quite far back. That if I ran my mouse along this 987, now if you look on the screen on my right, you can see it's moving very slowly because that's a 1 hour. But if I did that all the way back, you would see the crosshairs only moved that much because this is a 1 hour. But if I moved it all the way back, basically the purple line on the 1 minute, that'll be in the middle of the zone on the 1 hour. And so that's why we've chosen these moving averages, because they give you a great idea of trend. So you can see, just looking now at this screen, you can see basically that the 15-minute, although we're slightly rangy this time of the evening, the 15-minute is an uptrend. At the same time, we can see the 1 hour is also in an uptrend. It's probably quite a difficult time to be teaching with the huge moves we've had because things are a little bit mixed up. So the 987 is also huge. I mean, we won't spend too much time, but eventually if you chase this line all the way back, it's a huge respecter of price. So if often price will come down and will wick off this 987 and then we'll move the opposite direction. And so this is massive. So always look at what price action is doing around the 1 hour. So here we got the 233, which is equivalent to the 15-minute trend zone. This is the 987, which is equivalent to the 1 hour zone. Then the last higher time frame EMA we're going to add is the 4 hour. So this is the teal color, and you can see that the EMA number is 2584. Now it's funny, I'd never seen anyone use these before. I just worked out the maths. We'd looked at quite a few different other people training and teaching with other academies, and no one mentioned anything higher than the 987. But I've discovered this is huge for price action. I don't know how many of you were live trading with us. One of the, I think we're doing it on a Thursday morning then. So I picked it up. There was a double bottom off this 2584, which is the 4 hour. It came down once, went up, came down the second time, and after the second time, price just rocketed up the other way. It would be the same for the sell. So we can see here too, we're also slightly in an uptrend. The 4 hour now is beginning to trend up. If I hold my mouse here, we can see that we're on a slight uptrend. You won't see it as much. I could put a 4 hour here, but I mean you won't see much movement because being a 4 hour. So these are the three main trend zones for we call them the more higher time frame trend zones that are huge for price action. So you can see here, for example, that price came down. So we had the 2584, which is the 4 hour, running close to the 233, which is the 15-minute. And look, price couldn't break through. Now, when these things are bunched together, they almost form double support. So price tried to break through. It broke through the 4 hour. It came to the 15-minute, couldn't really close below, came up, tested both of them again. And then after that, you can see, I mean, there was a pullback. But after rejecting those two lines, there was a move of 300 pips. So look for when these bunch, by the way, you get something called, it's called compression. And after compression, there's always breakouts. And so you can see, let's see if there are other examples. Almost, you can see how almost wicking down on this 987, which is the 1 hour, couldn't break, and then price moves. But if you just, in your own time, just look through these, you'll see how much price respects these zones. It's huge for trading. That's why we've got them. And so the other key is price moves best. Let me just go to the to where we are now. So we can see price, because we've had a huge move down, we're not in complete order. And so obviously we're above the 233. We're going to get buy signals. As you see, buy signals are being plotted. When price really moves is when these three are on the right order. So ideally, you want green or red if you're going to sell. Then you want purple, which is the 1 hour, and the 4 hour below that. So when those are in the correct order, price tends to move a whole lot more. So there's something else. We're not going to do too many bells and whistles tonight. I've pointed out our little triangles up when price breaks above. We can see them being plotted here. Things are a little bit rangy. Well, I say they are rangy, but I tell you what, I've got my screen shrunk. For this time of the night, from 7:15, that was 100, over 100 pips, that trade. And this one here, if we just take it from where it rejected the 233, there was 68 pips. So there's a lot of movement. All right, then the other we're not going to look at many bells and whistles tonight, but the other one that I find very helpful, I'm sure all of us do, is trend zone alignment. So you will see, if you look through the settings, you can see trend zone alignment lights. We call it TZA. And there's a green, a red, and orange. And so basically, if it's green, you're above all the trend zones. If you're red, you're below all the trend zones. And between trend zones, you are orange. So I'm just going to click that on now, and you'll see a light will appear in the bottom left-hand corner. That gives you such a good indication of where you're at in terms of alignment with the trend zones. And so the basic rule is when it's green, it's all safe to buy, because then you're above all the major trend zones, including the 55 that we're coming to. So right now it's orange, and the reason is because we are below the 233. And I'm not sure where the 55 is. You'll put that on now. So when you have this light being orange, it means you're not correctly aligned with the zones. You may still get buy signals or sell signals, but there will be EMAs in the way. Now remember, we've just got the key EMAs as part of the strategy, because these are the ones that price respects the most. But in between the 233 and the 987, I mean, I can rattle them all off. There are other lines over here. There'd be other EMAs moving across. So when it's orange, there's a chance price can pull back and not always reach target. So I mean, this morning I had my finger on the trigger for a while, and it was mainly orange. I think there was some times where it went to red on the NAS, I think, but I was only going to trade if I had a bright green with the uptrend. I thought I'm not taking any risk because being orange with huge volatility, price was hitting things, bouncing off. It was bouncing off EMAs you couldn't see. So I was not prepared to take that risk. I mean, there were 100 pip candles, which was crazy. And so I was waiting, I was waiting for a green light on all three time frames, which I didn't get while I was looking. So I didn't trade. So this is the key part. So if you just have a look back, if we looked at this buy signal here, it would have been all green. This buy signal would have been all green. That buy signal, all green. And the only reason why now it's changed to orange is because, again, we've broken below the 233. And so these are the keys for the three higher time frames. So again, we've got the 15-minute, 233. We've got the 1 hour, the 987. And this is the 4 hour, which is the 2584. And so learn these things, learn what these triangles mean, and also learn this little trend zone alignment light. That's very helpful. All right, so hopefully we're learning some of the basics tonight. And again, when these things are in the right order is when we see the biggest moves. So that's what I look for. I look for the right order. So if we were in a buy, we would like to see, the green, then the purple, then the blue, and then obviously a bright green light for our trend zone alignment. That makes far greater trades. Okay, the next one we're going to look at is our EMA 55. So if we just go to style now and we click on here we go. There's our 55. So that is equivalent to what's happening on the 3-minute. I'll show you as I just pull up my other screen. But now what is different with this EMA is that there are actually 4 colors. You'll see it's got bright green, bright red, then a dark green and a dark red. And those who've been trading with us for a while, they will know that I call this one of the secret sources of the indicator. So if we for example, taking buys, you will see whenever it goes bright green, there's always a move. So look, it changed to bright green just after the signal. And we can see that obviously shot up. That was that trade. So we can see it was dark green. And once it changed to bright green, that's going to be a winner. And so this tells us what's happening on the 3-minute. So if I just opened up the second screen and I change this from a 1 hour back to the 3-minute, now things are obviously a little bit rangy now. Let me just stretch it out. So let's just go to when there was some better movement. So let's just look here. What time was this at? 13:36. That was about, oops, we got to go right back on the 1 minute. So 13:36, we're about over here. You can see that if I drag my mouse along the 55, what is happening is if you can see the crosshairs on the screen on the right, the crosshairs are going right through the middle. So on the 3-minute, we can obviously see we're in an uptrend. It's showing blue. And on the 55, we can see this showing us exactly what's happening on the 3-minute. So this is the strength of the indicator. If you took one look, for example, at this buy signal over here, you can see this is a good place to buy because obviously we're above the 233. So with the 15-minute is green. We're in an uptrend on the 15-minute. That makes the trade safer. We can see too, obviously once the trade got running, going bright green, we can see that flies up. And the same, okay, this was a counter trend here, but you can see how quickly this 55 now, bright red, that thing just dropped. That candle would have opened there somewhere. I mean, that thing dropped down 176 pips. So always look. So that's what I'm looking for. There's a buy signal. That could have been a valid signal. On the next candle, we're going bright green. Again, price always shoots up. There was 150 pips. So when I'm looking for trades, the best buys, I don't know if there's an example here. The strong signals is when you get a buy signal and you are already bright for the signal. So if you look back, you get them quite often. So I'm trying to see a good example. I mean, look, there was so much I mean, it was wild today, so it may be difficult just to pick up something, but look for, I'm just seeing if I can find an example quickly. Nothing's showing straight away, but look, I mean, look, it's not here, but if you see a buy signal and this was already bright green, that trade will always run. So here we go. Here's a great one. So look at this. So we've got a buy signal. And again, look at this. This trade is a really good trade. Although the zones weren't completely aligned, this trend zone alignment would have been orange on this trade. But what makes this a good trade is that we've got a bright green 55. That's telling us that the 3 minutes is in a strong uptrend on the signal. I mean, that would have opened. You can see that just rocketed up. That candle would have opened. Let me just get that thing would have rocketed up. That's 300 pips. That would have been a great trade. And so when it goes dark, it means price is pulling back. So, and the trend is slowing down. But again, when it goes bright, then it means price is going to move up quickly. And I've said that before. What I like about this indicator is that there are multiple excuses, for want of a better word, to be able to enter a trade. And so I count this as a signal. Or if you miss the buy there, price pullback, should I enter the trade? I tell you, okay, this is not ideal because we got this 1 hour, the 987 there. But when that went green on that candle, that's counted to me as a signal, and price went up another 230 pips there. That would have been a good trade. And so the same obviously is for a sell. When it goes bright, you can see here, this didn't generate a signal because the zones were in a line, but you can see when that went bright red, I mean, price just fell off a cliff. That was near the open, of course. There's like 500 pips. So I'm always looking, I'm looking at the 55, again, which is the 3 minute trend, not just to see what angle it's pointing at, but I'm always looking at what the color is. When it's bright, price always rockets up. All right, so let's just go one smaller now. You see, I made some notes, but I know there's so much off by heart. I wrote a few things down, but I think I've covered everything. All right, so then we're going to go now lastly to our main trend zone. So if we look over here, that is the 13 and the 21 together make our main trend zone. Then I like color fill. So I added a color fill in the code and trading trend zone. So this is our main, what I call our main trading trend zone. So we could have made these thicker. So we could have made these thicker to represent the zones because we'd like a thick zone. But if we did, the whole screen would be full. So we've just taken the middle, found the defining EMA that causes the most price action to see how the zones are shaped. I mean, again, this is always, here's a good picture again. Remember I talked about compression. Look at how much compression has taken place here. You've got the 1 hour, the 15 minute, and the 3 minute, the 55, plus the normal trend zone, all bunched up. And I mean, this was exceptional circumstances. That went up, I don't know, 600 pips or more. And so we can see the main trend zone changes color. So obviously uptrend, it is blue, downtrend, it's got this reddish color. And this was also huge. So the 13 does change color. It goes, you can see red in the downtrend, green in uptrend. We used to have our 21 changing color, but we decided to take the color out because it was a little bit noisy. But they are massive for support and resistance. You can see price continually comes back into the zone. And so when you're in an uptrend, the trend zones would be the same for the sell and the downtrend. Price often rockets up, comes back, gets some liquidity, rockets up, comes back, gets some liquidity. I call it like, dipping your foot in the river. It will always come back, get liquidity, and shoot up again. And so again, blue for the uptrend, red for the downtrend. And so the 21 is huge. This moving average. Now, this is the only difference. Every one of the other averages, the 13, the 55, the 233, the 987, the 2584, they're all exponential moving averages. Exponential moving averages put slightly more weight towards the last few candles than the early ones. The only simple moving average we've got, simple moving average, is the 21. This is an SMA, and this tends to calculate more of an equal spread over the whole length. So the 13 will give slightly more weight to recent candles, while The third, the 21, which is a simple moving average, is more spread out. And there's a reason for that. It gives a much smoother feel. All right. And this 21 is very important in the strategy too, because the 21 is obviously is really called, it's probably the mid EMA. So it's normally in the middle. So generally, this is accepted, not just our strategy, but generally traders would respect. Some people use a 20, some people use an EMA instead of an SMA. But our research is that the 21 SMA, it's a fib number, is the best. So it's very smooth, and you only tend to take buys above the 21 and sells below. And so it is sort of a defining, a moving average in terms of the strategy. Now, of course, for those who know the rules very well, one of our key rules, we got TAS, and the first rule is for the trend zones. And so the trend zones have to be aligned. And so we're going to put on the MACD in a minute just to show the MACD, but I'm just keeping it simple for now. Let me just, let's just see where this move was. What time was this? Let's just go back to this morning. And so let's just see, this was at, oops, where am I going? Let's go back to this morning's move. Gee, this was crazy. This was crazy. So this move was round about, let's go to the 8 o'clock move. Sorry, 8 o'clock. So here we are. So there was a move up around about 8 o'clock. So we've got a very key rule. So what I'm going to do is just turn off the 13 and the colorful. So let's just turn off the 13 and the colorful. So I just want to emphasize how important this line is. So all I've got on the 3-minute now is just the SMA 21 on the 3-minute. And for those who know our rules well, trend zone, we're looking at, for the angle. So the first rule is trend zone. We look at that when I put on the MACD. The second rule is angle. And what that angle is referring to the angle of this SMA 21, 3 time frames higher. And so price will always respect it. That's why we've chosen the SMA. Price always respects the angle. That's what I learned in my early days of trading. I never fight with this angle on the higher time frame. So if I'm in the 1 minute, I'm looking at the 3-minute. And even if I get a strong signal, now this signal we were already beginning to move into, look at this buy signal, that's gone bright green. So bright green means a strong angle. Man, I would have been tempted. Bright green, we are above the 15-minute, we're above the 1 hour. We are definitely heading up. Amen. And what happens is a massive pullback. Look at that. You would have just, the candle would open here. You would have been well into this trade. But look at this pullback from the peak to the bottom. That pullback almost 400 pips. Okay, now look, we're obviously in crazy conditions. There would have been less in normal trading days. But what caused that strong buy signal to pull back? And the reason is angle. So if we looked at, should we take this buy signal here, we have to get the second part of our 5 rules, 5 points, is look at the angle of the higher time frame. What angle is this thing pointing at the time of that signal? Well, it's pointing straight down, and that means it's going to pull back. And so we wouldn't have taken that buy signal. We would have waited for this curve to right itself and for price for it to be going in the direction we want to go. So price always goes in the direction of this 21. And that's why we look to high time frames for greater confirmation. We want to trade with trend, and high time frames give us the confidence to make sure we're trading with trends. So I'm just going to pop that 13 on and pop in the colorful. And then almost coming to land, then a high back and back to tie. So obviously a key part of our strategy also is our MACD. And I'm not going to, I'll delete my MACD. So by the way, the easy way to indicator, you can just click on those 3 dots, click copy, right click and paste. And there it's going to appear nicely for us over here. All right, so we're not going to talk too much about the MACD tonight, but just to cover it, the MACD is huge. We've got a whole training on it amongst our YouTube clips. The MACD is phenomenal for telling us trend and momentum especially. And so one of our rules is the trend zones must be aligned. So for a buy signal, we have to make sure that we got signals aligning the trend zone. And you can see I've chosen the same colors. Most of you would have figured out that by now. I've especially matched the color, the blue for up, red for down, so we can see immediately what trend we're in. So if, for example, we look here, we've got a buy signal there. Now, there would have been reasons to wait for that signal because we are slightly not correct there, not correct there. I mean, you could have jumped in. I mean, there were reasons you could have jumped in, but we always want to check that this zone is right before we jump into buy signals, and especially looking at higher time frames. So we can see by the time, I mean, that signal wasn't too bad, but you can see because it is pointing down, we always got a pullback. You could have sat through the pullback. I mean, Ty doesn't mind the pullbacks, but you could have waited. If you wanted to wait to be safe, you could have waited for a safer entry on the triangle up over there. So it may not be too visible, but there's a triangle up. And by then the zones are nicely aligned. So you can see we've got a buy signal. We're not aligned on the one. We're still red here, although we have crossed over on the MACD. It's likely to pull back because of the angle of the 21 is pointing down. You could have waited. And if you jumped in on that candle, that would have been a great place to enter. So that's what I like again about the strategy. We give lots of excuses to enter. You can enter on the MACD crossover. That triangle up is a good sign. Price is going to move up. So that's basically, I think I've covered everything. That covers all the basics of how the trend zone works, how signals are generated, and again, how they apply to high time frames. So again, this is our main trading trend zone, blue, red, with the 13 and 21. Then the 55 represents the 3-minute. This 233 represents the 15-minute. The purple represents the 1 hour. And the blue, the teal color, represents the 4 hour. So that's basically the fundamentals of trends, of TrendForce, trading with trend. And hopefully you've learned a bit. I know for some of you who've been with us for a number of months now, this may be old hat to you. Hopefully you know this off by heart and you can teach your friends. But I'll wrap it up there. So Thursday, remember, we're going to look at more the bells and whistles, all the little icons. I'm going to be explaining those, and hopefully we'll learn a lot more. So Ty, I'll hand back to you, and I'll stop share, and you can just pick it up from there.
Good. A couple of questions I'll relay to you. So the one that I think, well, they may have been answered in the chat, but they're great questions to cover. So the one of them was around the triangles that obviously fire around the 233.
Yeah.
Could you explain those in the context of the higher time frames as well? So they're not going to be firing just, am I correct in saying they're not going to fire every time price closes above or below? It's going to be a back on trend signal. If that makes sense?
Well, so basically that triangle, for example, if you look at the triangle up, that only plots. Now, I've only used 2 time zones to plot that triangle up or the triangle down. So that triangle up will only plot if you are above the 15-minute or the 233 on the 1 minute. So that green, the green band that goes green and red, depending on trend, once price breaks above that green EMA, the 233, you get a green triangle. It'll only plot if you're above the 987, which is the 1 hour. So that's a pretty safe option. So if price is above the 233, which is the 15-minute, and it's also above the 987, which is purple, there's a good chance you are going to catch a move. All right, it doesn't, again, it's not a buy signal, because it can mean, like in the example I was looking at this morning, you got a green triangle because you plotted above the 233 and price was already above the purple 987, but we were below the teal, the 4 hour. So it doesn't mean that all is clear. That's why we use the trend zone alignment light to light. So that would have been orange at the time. And so it basically says that you're above the trend, the main trend, the 15-minute, you're in buy mode, and that you're also above the 987, above the 1 hour, and there's a strong chance trend is moving up. So when you get that green triangle up, you're highly likely then you will then start getting buy signals. And the opposite is when you get a green triangle down. You'll only get a green triangle down if price
wait. Green or red triangle down?
Sorry, red. You only get a red triangle down if price closes below the 233, which is the 15-minute zone, and you're also below the purple 987. And so those are the two time zones that generate those triangles. So it's basically giving you a warning. You're now back with trend, well, a reasonable trend, and you can expect to get buy signals, or if it's below, you can expect to get sell signals. So hopefully that answers that. Does that make
Yeah,
it
no,
clear?
that's perfect. I knew there was a connection to those higher time frames, so
Yeah.
that's yeah, that's
But
brilliant.
it's only connected to the 1 hour. So it doesn't mean the coast is completely clear,
Yeah.
but it's clear enough to get a buy signal to get some pips or a
So
sell signal.
it also then answers the question why you wouldn't get a triangle printing just because price might be meandering around up and down and
Yeah, well,
breaking
I'll give
above and
you,
below, but it's a sign that you're back. Basically, the sign is we're back on trend.
yeah,
That's what it's telling us.
yeah. You see, this is how it works. If price breaks above the 233, but you're still below the 987, you're not going to get a green triangle plotted because that's too risky. You're still below the 1 hour, and you're going to get big pullbacks. Because remember, you are only seeing the time zones we've put on here, like the EMAs, the 233, the 987, the 2584. But there are other EMAs that price does respect, but we can't put every EMA on. We already look like a Christmas tree. We look like a spider web on a Christmas tree. So we're trying to keep it simple, but also just work on what is the most viable without cluttering up the screen. And so when those green triangles appear or red triangles appear, it means there's a good chance that price is going to move with that trend again.
Great stuff. Okay, great answer. Another question around the EMAs. So this might be a little bit trickier to answer, but when obviously looking from a 1 minute chart, so the different time frames have obviously got all of our same trend zones
Yes.
showing. The question is, which EMAs should we listen to when looking on a 1, 3, 5, and 8? So I answered it by saying basically the numbers that you're quoting are only relevant when you're looking at them from a 1 minute chart. So the
Yes. Correct.
987 is obviously the 987. It's showing you exactly where the trend zone is on the 1 hour chart when viewed from a one. But if you start looking at, say, a 3 minute chart,
Yes.
everything is now going to be a multiple of three. It's going to be the 987 will suddenly be whatever three times that is. So they're not going to be those exact fib numbers anymore. The way I answered it, and which I'd like you to comment on, is that they're still going to be relevant. You're still going to see price action respect them, but it's not going to be the exact 1 hour trend zone anymore, the exact 4 hour trend zone.
Yeah, exactly. So we've chosen, because most people trade off for 1 minute, it's the most popular, we've chosen to kind of zero in these time zones relative to a 1 minute. But if you trade the 3 minute, it's amazing how all this whole thing is completely transferable or translatable to any time frame. So if you on trading the 3 minute, the 55 on the 3 minute price is going to respect it as strongly as it would on a 1 minute. And so that's just how the fib numbers work and how this EMA works. Everything is kind of, translatable to high time frames. So if you looked at the 3 minute or the 8 minute or a 15 minute, and you zoom back, you will see how price pivots off the exact same EMAs, the 987, the 233, the 55, the 21. It's just how price, that's what amazed me when I first traded, just how I was fascinated how price in different zones respects the same EMAs, although obviously they represent different times and higher time zones, but price still respects them 100%.
Great stuff. I think you pretty much covered it. Couple questions in and around the, is the 233 15 minutes, not 50? Just to, clarify that one. Yeah, the 233 is going to be, I mean, guys, I tell you what, if you're brand new, you're going to have to watch this one twice. So go through it again. And I mean, look, I've even gone and written down copious notes every single time because every single time I'm hearing Dad explain it, I'm getting clarity on how to better explain it myself. But the 233, all those time frames that we quoted, so the reason why they have a number like the 987, but then it's the 1 hour, or the 2584 is the 4 hour, that is what our main trend zone, our 13 and 21 trend zone looks like if you were viewing it on a 1 hour chart or on a four
Exactly,
hour chart,
100%.
because that's where a lot of big money plays happen from. But we're able to see those big money zones on a 1 minute chart. So that's essentially that. So the 233 is essentially, our 1 minute trend zone, but on a 15-minute chart. So we're able to
Mm,
see what price is doing on a 15-minute chart just by
mm.
looking at that 233 on a 1 minute chart. Now that might take a little bit of time to get your mind around, but once you start really seeing it across different time frames, things will start to click in a big way. So don't see.
So that's the whole point of why we chose them. You can take one look at the chart and immediately know what is the 15-minute doing, what is the 1 hour doing, what is the 4 hour doing. Because those are also the major time zones that people look at. If you look at, I mean, many people have developed, trend tables. They tend to have the 1 hour, the 15-minute, the 1 hour, and the 4 hour. Those are major trend table sort of measurements that people use. So you can take one look at a chart and get a very quick impression about which way price action is going.
That's the one. And obviously, we will get into more detail as to why we still look at higher time frames. Because again, the same thing, those trend zones carry weight. Like you'll hear us talking about the angle of the 21 3 times higher. So if we're trading off a 1 minute chart, we're always going to be looking at that 3 minute chart because that's giving us a lot of strong information. So we will cover that in more detail once we've gone over the bells and whistles in our next session. After the bells and whistles, we'll be going through the rules in detail so that then you know when to actually push the button to click buy or click sell. So yeah, I think that is it. That's funny. One of the questions was in relation to wanting to clarify the 15 sounding like the 50 with your South African accent. That's hilarious. I love it.
Well, I thought we'll do one. I thought to do one training in Afrikaans, Ty. To a lot of Afrikaans-speaking people.
That'll land for half the team, I'm sure.
I lectured for 3 years in Afrikaans. I can always try give it a go,
Yeah, well, they'll fly over my head. Even though I was born there, I can barely speak
I wouldn't know what these terms were in Afrikaans.
Oh, that'd be hilarious. Well, we'll save that for another night. But yeah, guys. So tonight, that's all the basics. Like we didn't cover the pivots, which are support and resistance lines. That they'll come in the next one. But just so you can start getting familiar with the bare bones, the absolute core elements of TrendForce, that was tonight's goal. Thursday night will be all the little signals and the bells and whistles that make it powerful. Then we're going to tap into explaining the rules in high amounts of clarity and detail. And then after that, it'll be off to the races, clicking the button. So in the meantime, we'll wrap it up there. Let me bring myself back on screen here so we can wrap this thing up together. But thanks so much for tuning in live, Dad. Thanks so much for taking the time to plot that out so cleanly and precisely. And yeah, otherwise, guys, we'll see you all in the chat, and we'll see you on Thursday night, same time, same place. And don't forget Friday morning. Friday morning, we are back to 5 a.m. We were 5:30 just while daylight savings was a little out of sync between us and America. But lunch break in America, in theory, is over now around about 5 a.m. So we want to be ready for action. Dad, I mean, what, 5 a.m. all the way through to like 8, 9? There's going to be opportunity. Yeah, so
we do want to do a marathon sometime. Ty and I were talking about doing one marathon session because, I mean, we want to really pick up some good signals. So we will choose a time where we're just going to go until we get a good signal. So we'll do a marathon session now and then.
Yeah, which requires our families being on board. So we don't have, I just don't have toddlers and kids, and I don't have toddlers anymore. I don't have kids running in the midst of us looking for a signal. But we really do want to do that. We want to do a long one where we are all looking and taking a signal together. Because very often, right, we're on here for an hour and a half, and then 5 minutes after we shut it down, bang, there comes the ultimate signal. So anyways, guys, we'll wrap it up there. I know some of you might even be trading in London right now. Otherwise, enjoy, trade safe tomorrow morning, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, good night, everyone.
Bye.